All right, and we have begun. Hey Pike, how you doing?
Um, I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Being me is the best in the world. How are you doing, Hollowix?
Well, like just as we started recording, I felt like a tingle in my throat, and now my nose kind of hurts. So it's kind of like, oh no, I hope I don't sniffle because I know that's gonna sound terrible on the mic. And say something again really quickly. I need to make sure your audio is working.
Sniffle boy.
All right. Yep. It looks like your audio is working. All right. So, I mean, I think this is
hmm
going to be probably a short episode, but I've said that once before, and that ended up being like almost a 2 hour episode. So uh,
What
the
episode
reason
was that?
I can't recall which one. I think it was just
Hmm.
I can't remember what it was because I remember that one actually like flew by in terms of time. I'll look it up, but this one is an episode that's I will say this because you were like you started to watch this episode before I did, and you were kind of talking about it, and I was like, yeah, like it doesn't sound like this is gonna be a good one from what I recall, and I don't remember this being very standout. I rewatched it.
It's
I don't think it's
fine.
bad, and yeah, it's I kind of gave it a B. Like
hmm
it's fine. There's no issues, and I understand like the character's well done. But the reason this is such a nothing episode is it introduces a character who we never see again,
Yeah,
and it's
they did
so
have
heavy.
plans to bring her back, but
Yeah,
they
well,
just never did.
kind of like you were saying before we started. Like, you want to tell the lovely audience about like the little fact you had about like why this character kind of came into
Yeah.
existence.
So, originally a character that we're going to see, they were supposed to be the science officer on DS9. They come from a low gravity environment, and thus, in normal gravity, they have to use a wheelchair. But when they then go to low gravity, to replicate the effect that they do, it was just going to be so expensive that they're like, yeah, we need to use a different thing, and thus they came up with Jesse instead. But then, they kept this in the back pocket, and then the writer Evan Carlos Summers, I believe is how you say his name. He came onto the show during the first season as a Writers Guild intern, and he was approached about using the character, and uh, Evan himself is in a wheelchair, and he wanted to write uh, uh, in the second season, he was invited back to pitch episodes, and he wanted to revive this concept, and did so by saying like, "Hey, I myself am in a wheelchair. I understand the struggles that this character would have gone through, and I think I can add empathy to this character, to how and show that, the show that it, uh." While it does matter to some extent that she's in a wheelchair, she is still a perfectly valid part of Starfleet. Um,
I and
because
I don't
ha-
disagree with that. I think
mhm,
a lot of the characterization for the character is it's like rough but realistic in the sense of I can believe this is a real
mhm.
person. That doesn't make them likable. That doesn't make them justified in how they
No.
act sometimes, but it's believable in how they act.
Yeah,
And
and I believe Bashir calls her out for the behavior as well,
oh
and
yeah,
was like,
she
"Oh, it's probably back."
one of the I mean she even calls herself out for her behavior, apologizing for it. But we'll get into that. I think my some of my issue with the episode that we might have is like I don't really feel like that message that he kind of had really came across. Um,
Mhm,
because they make a point it's like, oh yeah, even if she's bound to a wheelchair, and if she's handicapped in this very like limiting way, she can still be a
mhm,
strong contributing member to the team. There's not really anything she does except in the like one final scene, and that's really kind of a luck based thing that has her use some sort of other strength that she's developed. Like one of the classic
mhm,
things you see in a lot of media is the wheelchair bound character who's like hyper intelligent, right? You'd have like Professor
mhm.
Xavier, you have Oracle from DC Comics. You, what?
I, I, I'm sorry. I. You know the meme? I'm pretty sure I sent it to you of what Xavier did to
Okay, yeah. Well,
Magneto in the 90s.
I know
Yeah,
what
and
you're
I.
talking about, and so anyone who doesn't know, it's just this funny like scene because Magneto's origin. I'm not an expert in like comic books. Magneto's origin largely at this point in time is associated with like he was a sufferer of the Holocaust, in World War II, and the scene from the '97 X-Men series was like Xavier forces him to relive these traumatic memories that he had in order to like stop him from killing him. So it's just kind of this like, Jesus Christ, Professor. Like, could you not have disabled him in a different?
Legitimately,
I need
yeah.
to point out. I need to point out if we're talking like some stuff that Xavier does. This is a weird side tangent. If we're talking about some stuff that Xavier does, he can like freeze people by like stopping their perception of time. And instead, he's like, "No, I'm gonna make this guy relive the Holocaust." And it's like, holy crap, man. But
It's
admittedly,
very much like
I remember watching that scene. I was like watching. I was like, wait, is this supposed to be like World War II? It doesn't look like it. It just looks like soldiers attacking and burning down a village, which could just be anything. So I don't know enough about like if that's why I was mentioning like I don't know if like Magneto's origin was always World War II, because it's just one of those things where over time you kind of have to change his origin based on when the story's taking place to fit his like age group. Because
yeah.
I guess it would still work then, but I was thinking of it in almost the opposite as well. Because like eventually we're gonna get to a point if you want to do like modern day X-Men stories and you want to use Magneto, you can't use World War II anymore because he'd be too old. But
Well,
that's
I mean,
that's
they kind of got around. I mean, so remember, the time I learned about that as a backstory was the X-Men movies, where they explicitly like, "Hey, this is not set in modern day. It's like, I think the '60s or
oh yeah,
something." I can't
that's
remember.
yeah, that's First Class.
Yeah.
And obviously, yeah,
Yeah.
you could do that, but like, I just mean like if you wanted to do one in modern day, right? If you wanted to do this
Mm,
takes place in the far off or the day of 2024, it's like, and here's Magneto, the villain, who is a victim of the Holocaust, and it's just this actual like geriatric old man who is in no way like he's just really old, and it's like, oh, this guys, he's really old at this point. If you wanted to have been like a teenager during the Holocaust, I'm just saying.
yeah.
But as you can tell,
You're making light of this.
we're not making light of it. We're making light of the people trying to use that. But the point I was about to just say, it's like it really shows how interesting this episode is that we're more interested in talking about X-Men and that one meme that you found relating to it.
Well,
Um,
it's less that it's just because you brought up Xavier. I mean, that's the last thing I had on my mind on Xavier. And
well,
sorry, everyone.
back to our point now that weird tangent's over. So you know, they didn't really have her do anything. I feel that was super like how she contributes to the team despite this limitation. So it's a weird thing that sort of seemed to be the purpose of it because I don't feel that it really came through. Admittedly, though, like I think this episode does kind of go to show a pretty strong representation of like how certain people can kind of act with an understanding of the limitations they have and how that can maybe cause their personalities to shift. I mean,
Mhm.
fortunately, I've never been like super close to someone who had such severe disability and that I knew them before. Like I had a friend in high school that was in a wheelchair, but she had always been in a wheelchair. And the person we're seeing in this story is her alien species. She lives on a planet with low gravity, like you mentioned. So her whole life, she's been perfectly capable of moving around and that. But because she wants to leave her planet and explore the stars, she now has this debilitating limitation that she kind of resents. Right?
Mhm.
So, it's interesting in that sense of like, here's a character who I think they're even sort of cognizant of how even they're psychologically affected by this limitation, not just physically affected by it. I think it's a good episode showing that sort of detail.
Mhm.
And weirdly enough, it's also reminding me of the character from the Orville, the sort of reverse situation. It's that alien species that comes from the super heavy gravity
Yeah.
planet,
Two
and because of
characters.
that,
Remember, they had
yeah,
to
they
replace her because um she did come back. Don't worry, everyone. She lives. Don't worry. It's
But
just
yeah, no, yeah.
like
So
a
they just she's super strong, and she had a similar thing where I think basically she
her
like
planet. She was going to lose her super strength because she wasn't exposed to like basically this can happen in rare cases with her species where after not being exposed to their gravity for long enough they would lose their ability to basically live on their planet because their body would just permanently adapt to not
no, yeah.
being
Well,
under that
she
gravity.
would she would atrophy just like astronauts do if they go into space, right? It's a matter of
Yeah.
if you're not your muscles are not being used in the same way. Um,
Hmm.
Although I think in her circumstance, because they even make a point, because she could theoretically work out a lot, like under really heavy stress to maintain that strength. But I think they made a point in that where it's like her organs would just cease functioning because
Hmm.
on her planet because they can't take the gravity, and it's like, oh well, you really can't like train your organs that way. Uh, so,
Yeah.
but here we have a similar plot, and I mean, I don't think we need to go scene by scene. This is a very weird episode. But it's fairly straightforward. So you have the character Melora. She's a science officer who's performing some sort of research in the Gamma Quadrant, and of course, because she has these limitations, she is like the station's getting ready for her. One point they make is that for some reason, Cardassian construction is like not compatible with like anti gravity lifts or like technology to
Mm.
account for this because it sounds like they actually have technology to account for like people being handicapped like this. Like I don't know if it would
Mm.
be some sort of like mobile suit, power suit sort of thing where they'd wear it and because she wears like this exoskeleton. No, she wears like this like exoskeleton around her body, like around her arms and
Yeah.
legs. And I can imagine that there's like a sci-fi version of that like allows you to operate under higher gravity. Uh, but because that doesn't really work on a Cardassian station, for some reason, she has to use this wheelchair. And then, of course, because the station's also designed to. Hold on, Pike, you're kind of breaking up.
I want to say,
Hold on,
uh,
Pike, your mic
I,
is. Hold on, Pike, your mic is really fucked up right now. All right. Wow. While he fixes that, uh,
hello.
oh, hold on. This actually might be on my end now. Hello.
Wait a
One
second.
second. My internet might be screwed up. We're going to. Pike, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. I think that was my internet screwing up, but so it was
Okay.
making you sound like a robot. But now it seems fixed, and the
Ah,
recording should be perfectly fine. But
um,
yeah,
I
you had something
wanted
you
to
want to
say
say.
something. Yeah, so it kind of doesn't it. I mean, it is weird, but it doesn't surprise me that the Kardashians wouldn't really design like for that because remember, what Terra Nor was. It was basically a like n- n- basically a point from which the government could watch the population on Bajor from, and also a place for forced labor to happen. I can't remember what they did, but it's like there's
Well,
not really a like it's not a place of commerce, and Cardassian society seems to like what is your like I would fully believe like yeah Cardassian society is not accommodating to those who have disabilities. Uh,
okay, sure,
at
but
least.
like I was more saying like I don't think it's a matter of the Cardassian station was designed to not be compatible. I think they're just trying to make like it sounds like something about the station is not allowing them to use their gravity tech like the
Mhm.
composite like they've brought up like the way the station is like the metal that composites it and stuff like that has like some sort of
Yeah.
weird bullshit interference that really again it's simply done because in Star Trek most of these issues are resolved so whenever we don't want the issue this has always been a problem right like even in like in TNG in the original series it's like,
Mhm.
oh, for some reason we can't use this tech that we always used before because if we could use this tech, it would solve the problem, right? It's kind of a meme in like TNG of like, oh man, if only we had the transporters on there right now, they could solve the problems. But unfortunately, there's this subspace interference, so we can't use transporters. It's like, oh,
Do you
well,
remember the
that's
warp speed? Do you remember the environmentalism warp speed episode where
that is
they're
a
like,
completely
yeah,
different issue. But yes, uh,
yeah, it's not.
I'm mostly talking about like again, it's like you wanted to tell a story, and in this case, you want to tell a story about a wheelchair bound person. Star Trek doesn't really have those though, so you really kind of have to contrive some crazy sci-fi explanation for why someone's wheelchair bound in Star Trek.
Mhm. Why
I
they
think they
can't
did.
immediately solve it? Yeah.
Well, again, it's like yeah, so they're like yeah, Cardassian Station's not available. Don't worry about it. Also, for some reason, Bashir is like super obsessed with this woman. He is like she's so amazing, she's incredible. I've read every paper she's published, and I'm like really. I mean, okay, and he's like, oh, she's overcome such adversity, and I'm sitting there thinking like, I mean, that's cool, but he's really fucking obsessive about it.
Yeah,
Like
this is a very like. Do you
he's like,
remember
she's
the
it's so
door?
invigorating listening to her. Like I'll say this: Bashir's actor is on point. He's really kind of conveying a guy who is hyper simping for this girl.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah. Like it's a less creepy version of the Geordi episode. So there was an episode where Geordi works with the
yeah, that
computer
episode.
recreation of, and then later on they brought that actress back, who's the actual like person now. But the issue is like Geordi acts weird, very
Yeah,
kind of weird.
Jordy is like a million times better in non-Jordy episodes when he's supporting because he's such a great character there. And then when they have Jordy episodes, they always make him cringe. Uh,
Yeah, poor Geordi.
yeah, poor Jordy. But no, with this episode, for some reason, Bashir is like hyper simping for this woman, which is like fine. He's like custom made part of her like wheelchair, so she has easy access to it. They've adapted a lot of like levels of the station to like be more wheelchair accessible. Uh,
Yeah.
So, and I want to point out one thing that's a little bit like weird is like, I don't know how impressive this woman would be. She's an ensign, right?
Mm.
Like she's like the lowest ranked officer, so she's only. I mean, let's assume she is like hyper intelligent and talented. She hasn't. She either is just started or she hasn't really risen in the ranks.
Yeah, but she might have done work. Hang on, let me
Oh, sure. Like
look
she may have
up.
done. She may have done work like prior to that. I'm not saying that's not like reasonable. I guess I mostly mean in the sense of like uh, it's weird that he is so obsessive about her, but that kind of goes to part of what the plot is going to have revolving her because this is a Bashir episode when it's not about Melora. But
Yeah.
Melora arrives, and the first thing we see is she is struggling to like walk down this corridor. She has a cane. Like I said, she kind of has this like exosuit sort of thing you can kind of see on screen, which is like just
Hmm.
little like metal bars wrapped around her arms and stuff like that. And she clearly is exhausting herself walking. And when
Yeah.
she runs into like Dax and Bashir, they're a little surprised she's trying to walk. They got her chair, and like she's immediately extremely off like putting. Like Bashir's trying to be like super nice, and she's like, "Oh, you have my trolley ready?" He's like, "As requested." And she's like, "This is different from the one I practiced with." He's like, "Oh, I modified it." It's like, let's see, it's like, yeah. She says it kind of bitterly, and he's like, "Oh, I could fix you." And she's like, "No, I will adapt." And then she like immediately starts using it, and she's like trying to like
Mm.
she's trying to show that she doesn't need help, and that's kind of the whole crux of her character,
Hmm.
right? Is she's all about
Yeah.
uh she's all about like I can do this myself. I'm independent. I'm strong. Uh and
Yeah.
when you first see her, yeah, she's really kind of hyper bitchy. Um let's see. I'm trying to
Because
think of like
here's the thing, like at least she backs it up. Of like, yeah, she is. She is pushing herself to be better.
oh
It's
no,
like,
like I said, like they go into explaining her personality and justification for it in a way that I do think is very realistic. It's why it's like I wasn't surprised when you mentioned that they had someone who actually like lived through this as the writer, because
Mhm.
like I was like, oh, that actually makes a lot of sense. This feels like a real person. I feel like I understand this character just from a few scenes. And again, like one of the things that happens is Dax is like, oh, you and I are going to go to the Gamma Quadrant, taking a runabout and doing some examinations, and she immediately assumes this is, oh, you're sending someone with me because you don't believe I can do it myself.
Mhm.
And they have to explain to her, it's like, no, you're an ensign. Cisco's not going to send an ensign to the Gamma Quadrant on her first day here. Uh,
Yeah.
So she's immediately like argumentative. She's fighting. She gets to her room and apparently she can control the gravity within it with a specific device. She thanks him
Hmm.
and then immediately shuts the door on them. Uh,
Mm.
Meanwhile, there's this B plot with like Quark, and while Quark is great in this episode, I will say this B plot is literally just there for like plot, like it's
Plot.
it's it's only there, well, it's only there to give like a conclusion to the main plot, right? So
Hmm.
in this strange looking alien, and I mentioned he's strange looking alien because he has these like little uh like spine vertebrae thing like over his mouth. It's hard to get like a picture of it, but
Hmm.
it's like I don't know how these guys eat with this thing over their mouth. I guess they have to eat through the side of their mouth. But he comes in and he's like,
Uh.
"I'm here to kill you, Quark." And apparently, this is like an old business friend of Quark who Quark betrayed him. And the only good thing of this plot line and I'll mention it again when we get to it because I'll need the picture. Is when Quark tells Odo, "Someone's here to kill me." Odo just smiles. Odo's like,
Yeah.
"Ah, man, if only you died and I didn't have to do my job to save your life." Like, that's the only good thing from
Yeah.
this plot
This.
because like, this is really weird. Like, it's a weird plot.
I'm looking at this actor, and he looks like the alien he's playing. It looks like one of those. Oh, what are they called? They're from later on, the trader guys. That they work with. The Karma. The Karma. Or
Yeah.
no, I'm thinking of it. Well, they look. No, I'm never mind. I'm looking at the Karma. It's like no, they don't have. But I know there was another alien that has this weird mouth thing. And it's very
Oh, I'm sure they've
yeah.
reused. I'm sure they reuse them. But I can summarize this plot in like a few small like bits. So this guy shows up, end of the scene. He says, "I'm going to kill you, Quark." The next time we see him, he's just still sitting in the bar, and Quark is giving him like all these nice meals and all this stuff, and he's basically trying to say like, "Don't kill me. Like, look how nice I am now. I'm trying to pay you back for accidentally getting you sent to prison." And the guy's like, "Yeah, I'm still going to kill you." So Quark goes to Odo, tells Odo the truth, tells Odo this. Odo like starts to investigate. And then I mean, we'll get to that part as it interjects the main plot, but then he betrays Quark, like grabs all this stuff, tries to like because they have this like Quark has this like trade deal for like what is it 199 bars of gold pressed latinum or something.
Mm, Probably like
Trying to find
more.
like I'm trying to find like the number, but once he basically
Yeah, 199.
once he basically like tells the guy this, the guy's like, "Oh, all right, I won't kill you. Instead, we're gonna work together and uh, we're gonna work together and we'll finish this deal together." And Quark's like, "Yes, I weaseled my way out of being killed again." Uh, and then like again, to summarize that, like the whole point is like it's a trade deal where Quark is basically trading like ancient relics from this alien race that they lost, like these ancient rings. And he's like, "Yeah, I found these. I'm gonna give them back to you, but obviously for a cost." And the guy's like, "All right, fine, we'll do business." And then as they're doing the trade off, uh, the guy who wants to kill Quark, his name is Ashrock. He's like, "No, now we have the rings and the money." And then he kills the guy they were doing trading with, and he kidnaps Quark. That's the B plot, right? Like it's not.
Yeah.
There's I mean normal acting from Quark. It's not anything interesting, and like that's it. We've summarized the whole B plot. It's not. Again, it's like there's not an issue with it. There's nothing like world breaking or game breaking. It's just
It's
that's it.
serviceable as a B plot. It just yeah, it doesn't like have anything particularly funny. It's not
I mean, again, the
insightful.
only good part of it is when Quark tells Odo, "Oh, this guy's trying to kill me," and Odo just smiles. Like Odo begins to investigate it, but he doesn't have anything on the guy because the guy hasn't done anything illegal yet. Uh,
Yeah.
but we can get back to the main plot. So let's see, because the next thing we have, oh, so Melora comes to the command office, and she is like, I'm trying to find like the exact transcript of the scene. Uh, da, da, da. Like her wheelchair can't properly get in the office at first. Cisco introduces herself. She's like, "Oh, am I late?" He's like, "Nope, not at all." Although she notices that Cisco is already kind of having a meeting with Bashir and Dax, so she presumes she's late, and she's sort of bitter about it.
Hmm.
And then he's like, "No, I was just talking to my other officers. Like, we have conversations all the time." Uh, and like she's being immediately like standoffish with Cisco. And I gotta point out again, she's an ensign. He outranks her by quite a bit, and like
This is
she's
also Cisco. This
well,
is
this
also
is this
Cisco.
is Cisco, and like I think Cisco's generally a pretty understanding and nice guy. He's willing to like let someone. Uh, I want to word this properly. He's willing to let someone walk all over him until it crosses a line. At which point he's like, "Nah, I'm moving the line back like 100 steps, buddy." Like
Yep.
he's not passive so much as he is agreeable, right? He's like, "Look, if
Yeah.
you're going to be an asshole to me, I'm not going to respond immediately. I'm going to let you be an asshole. But the second you do something with your assholery that crosses that line, I retract so much of my goodwill." And he pushes back hard. So Cisco's very much someone who's like, so she's being very like aggressive to the point where I'm like, I think that's my one issue with this scene is I understand because like
Mm.
in this scene she does apologize to Bashir and Dax for her behavior before. She kind of mentions that she was tired from the flight and stuff like that. It's like, okay, you know what, you're apologizing. you kind of recognize you came off on a bad foot. Understandable.
Hmm.
I still feel even if she is, because I think after the scene we immediately get sort of the justification for her behavior. But even if she is going to be standoffish with people, I feel she wouldn't do it with her directly superior officer. I don't know.
Mm,
Maybe it's in the nature that she's not actually like working under him necessarily. Like she's here for a specific project and then she leaves. So there is
mhm.
somewhat of a dynamic of you're not really in charge of me for the long haul. Like, he's in charge of me technically, but only for now. That's maybe the best I can say.
Yeah.
Although, we do have a nice little speech from her, so I will kind of like read it out. So, Melora says, I simply object to being treated like someone who's ill. And that's kind of the core of her character. And Cisco's like, I don't see anyone doing that. And she's like, well, then try sitting in the chair, Commander. No one can understand until they sit in the chair. I have been in one chair or another since I left my homeworld. My family gave me this cane made from the wood of the garlantic tree. They had no idea what it would be to live like off-world, what you consider normal gravity. Only a handful of Lasians have ever left home, but I always knew that I had to be one of them. And she's going through all this. She's like, nothing's going to stop me from chasing my dream. And this is a bit of a clunky speech, but it does summarize her character pretty well. I think it's
Mhm.
I think it's a little like I guess it makes sense in character why she has to give this big speech because she's trying to make a point that you shouldn't uh, treat her with kid gloves. But it does feel a little clunky. Um,
Yeah.
uh, Although Cisco does immediately clap back. It's like you must feel a great deal of pride in what you've achieved. Like the way he says it, he stresses the pride in the sense of like you do realize you're being very prideful right now in the sense of like be careful how you stand because like you're not really coming across as like endearing as a person.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And then he explains, look, I am sending you with Dax. I don't care what you say. It doesn't matter that you think you could do this on your own. I'm not sending an ensign to the Gamma Quadrant.
Mhm.
And then we get to, and this is this following scene with Bashir is the one that's all about like breaking down her character, and this is where she starts to become endearing. Because Bashir comes in, he starts making small talk. Oh, is the low grav like field actuator working? She's like, it's fine. And I want to see if I can find the line because let's see. She does apologize, like, oh, I am sorry. She's like, my speech wasn't intended to attack you personally. When she said earlier, and he's like, I'm sure you've never set out to attack anyone personally, but you do seem to attack a lot. And she's like, that's insensitive of you. And uh, he's like, oh, well, so she calls him doctor. He's like, yeah, I'm no longer your doctor. Uh, and she's like, you decided I need a friend. He's like, ooh, another attack. See, you do it
Mm.
so well with such charm, it's hard to tell. And even she's kind of like taken aback, like, oh shit, someone's calling me out on being a bitch.
Yeah.
Like I have her
Yeah.
face right here. She's like, oh crap. And he immediately basically starts responding to her the same way she responds. Like everything he says is on the attack. And she's kind of like, I see how it's coming across. And then she's like, look,
Mm.
she made a point of like, yeah, it always kind of worked until now. And he's like, see, that's the nicest thing you've said to anybody since you got on this station. And then he asks if she's hungry and he wants to see if she wants to go to dinner. And she's like, oh, then afterwards we'll go dancing. He's like, ooh, red alert. But she agrees to go to dinner with him. And I'm like, okay, first off, the riz on this man waiting like less than 24 hours to ask this girl out. When you're both like officers in a military, like, I'm like, Bashir, you might get in trouble for this. Also, she was your patient. There's some ethical questions here.
Mhm.
But it's fine.
Yeah.
Star Trek has always been a little bit more loosey goosey with like because TNG, well, the original series, and a little bit more so in TNG. Roddenberry was all about how like relationships are so much more casual and less stressful in the future. Which,
Mm.
that's a whole discussion we could have about how well that's portrayed and if that's realistic and all that sort of jazz. But at least here, it kind of actually comes across as like, yeah, he likes her, so he asked her out, and she agrees. There's not really any drama to it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that works. And they go to, let's see if I can find it. Well, this is the scene where, then there's the scene where Quark is trying to like give this guy money or trying to give this guy food, and the guy's like, yeah, I'm still gonna kill you. They go to the Klingon restaurant. Is this the first time we see the Klingon restaurant?
I think in terms of actual interacting, I think we've seen it in the background and such, but never really like interacted with it. So yeah, basically the first time.
Um,
Uh,
and I'm impressed because Bashir is kind of like, he's ordering, and the way he's ordering. I don't want to say it's funny because he's ordering like a normal person, but the chef is clearly annoyed with it because like Bashir's
mhm.
being kind of like indecisive about what he wants. And I'm just gonna say
Yeah.
this: I don't know why anyone would want to eat Klingon food. It's all of it's alive. He just throws like all these worms on a plate, and they're moving. So the actors were actually holding these worms, and I'm like, good on them, I guess. Uh, and it's like, why
Mhm.
would you eat these? Why? They're gross. They're dirt covered worms. But Bashir seems totally cool with it. And then uh,
Mhm.
Star Trek does this a lot. Whenever they want a character to seem tough and strong, they just make him Klingon like. She starts speaking like perfect Klingon and like yelling it, and she gets like the order, and then the guy's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't realize that you were like respectable customers. Let me get you the good food." And he like throws the plate away he just made, and I'm like, "Were you just giving these people shitty food because you didn't like them?" And
Or
then
they
once you
don't
like
know
them,
how to
I'm gonna give you
appreciate the
real
food.
food. Well, yeah, he's like, oh,
Like,
you don't know how to appreciate real Klingon cuisine, so he was giving him shitty like the shitty stuff normally, but it's like, oh no, you guys, you speak like Klingon and you know how what you want to order. Let me get you something real nice.
well, also like the fact of like she did it in the proper way by Klingon customs, and so it's like, yeah, that. So it's like, yeah, yeah,
It's
it's
just
just.
it's weird. It's like I think like the Klingon culture's like sometimes over. I don't know, like overrated. I feel like they're like, oh, they're the best
Mhm.
fighters. I'm like, dude, they run around with like knives and batlets like half the time. Like, are they really
Mhm.
that strong? Like, no one's stronger than a phaser, buddy. The phaser, the great equalizer of space. But no, they're like Klingons are the best fighters. I'm like, okay, sure, buddy. Like,
I mean,
uh,
maybe one on like I would say like, oh, one on one they're probably stronger than humans, and
sure.
like
So are
they're
Vulcans.
like I think the issue is like, for as honorable as they talk, Klingons figure out some quick ways to get close to you where like, so I can't remember what the test is called, but they basically like have this test of like how fast can you draw a gun and be able to shoot somebody running at you with a knife. The Klingons are very good at making that very much a fight you do not win.
No, I mean, I'm
Uh,
here. I'm 100%. I'm 100% like I get it. Klingons are strong. I guess like I just get tired of like the trope that you see a lot of Star Trek do, where it's like we need to portray a character as strong, so we have them
mm,
either beat up Worf because that was the joke of TNG, right? Is anytime we need to show someone strong, you have Worf job,
mhm,
right? You have him lose a fight just to show someone else is strong. Or you have them do some Klingon thing, right? Like they have Jadzia, who's like, "Oh, I speak perfect Klingon," or "I know how to fight like a Klingon." Or they'll have some
mhm,
random character be like, "Yeah, don't you get it? I'm tough because I have some. I am familiar with some element of Klingon culture." Like, that's what they're kind of doing with Melora here is the fact that she speaks like fluent Klingon and she knows how to order and what she wants. I'm like, what are you trying to present here? That like she's tough and like she's formidable at least like mentally and socially. It's like I didn't need her to be speaking Klingon to know that. It's
mhm.
weird. It's like it has nothing else to do with her character. Like it's such a one-off thing in this episode, which is why I even found it weird. It's like it has nothing else to do with her character. I don't even think they
Mhm.
explain why she knows Klingon. Uh, yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
But then we get a nice scene after we see Bashir eat a worm. Uh, just like drops little wiggling worm down his throat. He talks the story about why he decided to become a doctor. And
Mm.
it's a nice story. It's about how he and his father were on a trip. They came across someone who was dying of an injury during an ionic storm. Uh, Bashir stayed with the person while his father ran off to go get a doctor. Uh, and then Bashir was holding the person. The person died in his arms. And when his father got back, it was too late. But then they were told that there was a herb, a simple herb, all growing all around them that, if applied properly, would have saved her life. So the idea that, and I like this story, right? I think it's really interesting that the thing that motivates him to learn more about medicine is the idea that he could have saved this person if he just had the knowledge, but he didn't at the time,
Mm.
and as such, someone died. I think it's a really, I mean, it's such a short story, but I think it's super, like, just like if any character who has a story, I'm like, I get why you're a doctor because that is probably very traumatic for you that you could have saved this person and you didn't. And it's not your fault,
Mm-hmm.
but any other time in your life now, if you don't know the answer, it might be your fault. So now he has to be intelligent. He has to be, the best, and he becomes a doctor. And later when we learn a little bit more about his character, that maybe is a little bit more informed about how someone as intelligent as him, not knowing something, is probably considered a big flaw in his mind.
Mm-hmm.
But she kind of
Yeah.
appreciates the she appreciates the story, and she seems to like him, but she's like, oh, you know what? I have to go on a mission tomorrow, so see you later. And she kind of like quickly leaves. But yeah, there seems to be a connection. The next morning, Jadzia goes to find her. Turns out like she left her room and she's just trying to get like these things for their trip. Ended up falling and had to crawl back, like bruised her head. She's hyper embarrassed and hyper like self-conscious. Like, I was trying to do a simple thing and I got hurt and I needed someone to come save me because I was just floundering around on the ground, as she says. And yeah, it's like this is another like scene I think is pretty good for her because it shows like we see why she acts the way she does is because she's afraid of this moment, right? When she's at her most
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable. So she never wants to appear vulnerable because when she is vulnerable, she's this floundering girl on the ground who needs anyone's help. And it's like, I get it. Like, in a good way, I get it because, showing us at her weakest, we understand why she's generally lashing out at people. I don't know. I think it's simple. It's done well, and again, like probably something that the person who wrote this story had experienced himself. Right? It's the nature of he probably fell down at one point and he needed someone to help him, and he felt embarrassed because it's like, oh, I fucked up and I fell, and now I have to like be picked up and carried by someone else to back to my chair or something. I can get why someone might be embarrassed about that, especially if it's something
Yeah.
that's like, man, like I wish I could just do this on my own. But yeah, it delays them going to the Gamma Quadrant for a day. We have another nice scene with Bashir and Melora. Although this is where we get to see the zero gravity effect, where she invites him into her room, where she's like, "Hey, I could show you the zero gravity thing." It's kind of like another date for them. And one thing that's funny, and I think there's like something weird about the scene. Hold on, I wrote it down. First off, when she's like, "You should brace yourself for the zero gravity," he just like puts his hand on a flat piece of wall. I'm like, I don't think that braces you at all, Bashir. Like, you don't seem to have any grip.
Yeah.
It's like, I gotta point out, it's on the screen right now. It's like, all right, brace yourself. He's just like, all right, hand on flat surface of wall. I'm like, you probably want to grab something, you know. Also, like, it's zero gravity. You're not
Yeah.
just gonna like fly up in the air. You're just gonna like stay where you are until you push yourself off. In fact, putting your hand on this wall the way you are is just gonna push you off probably. But another thing I thought of is, why is there no like zero gravity training in Starfleet?
I mean, why do they have fucking families on the fucking Enterprise like it's a pleasure cruise? Like, you're asking
So
questions
that's
that don't.
that's a bit different. But you're like that. At least the justification is, uh, they don't really view themselves as a military, although they are. They are largely like an exploratory vessel, and if they're going out on like 5-year missions or something like that, you're gonna want your family there with you. Now, admittedly, it doesn't make sense that like it is a bit weird. I don't think it's like I don't think that's hyper justified, but I get why they think that's justified. What I'm saying here is, okay, let's be fair. Like 99.99999% of space is zero gravity or microgravity or whatever you want to call it. If you're in a spaceship and the gravity mats, because we know they're gravity mats from a later episode of DS9. If the gravity mats cease to function, you're going to need to be able to navigate in zero gravity. That just seems
Yeah.
like it takes place in space. Just have an elective that's like mandatory. It's like 1 credit at Starfleet to just, yeah, here's how you navigate in zero gravity. Just do the class once. We don't expect you to like redo it every year or something like that, but it's such a basic thing. I mean, I have to look at an astronaut to see how long. I have to, like, they probably have interviews to say how long it takes to adapt to zero gravity, at least in terms of like how you move about it. I'd imagine it's almost not that long. It's like, okay, how to stabilize yourself, and then how to kind of like push off with the right amount of force to propel yourself through the air. Don't get caught where you can't push off of anything because then you're just going to float there helplessly, right? That'd be like the simple part of it. But
Mhm.
I don't know. I'm not saying they need a combat zero gravity course, but like let's be fair. When she turns off the gravity, Bashir just starts floating around like he's like, oh, I can't control myself. I'm like, dude, like it's zero gravity. Like,
Come
just
on,
relax.
Bashir. We know you are literally like genetically superior. We know you should be able to do this. Come on.
Well,
Come on. Come on. Come on.
and it's like it is interesting because once the gravity's turned off, she starts moving around like super effectively. And I'll say this: the effect doesn't look bad. I'm gonna see if I can play a little bit of it. I could put the cover on to help
Put the
hide a little
cover
bit of
on.
it. But like yeah, she's moving around. There's a good amount of her just like pushing off the wall. It's a really impressive effect for the time period, right? Like we know
Mhm.
this is practical. They built a whole set for this specifically because I think they thought she was going to be a more regular character. Uh, but I guess it probably was expensive to use and maintain this set. So they were just like, yeah, it's not
Mhm.
it's probably not worth keeping. Uh, and yeah, it's like a really nice effect. And then of course this leads to Bashir and Melora doing it in zero gravity.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Although
Yeah.
it has a yep, tasteful pan down. Um, then uh, we can kind of summarize some of the next bits because we've gotten most of her character. She's very self-conscious about wanting to be in a relationship because she's always on the move. She's going from place to place. She's never settling down. If she started a relationship with Bashir, she would never really see him. And then of course she talks about how like her being like handicapped also has those limitations. If he wants to go somewhere, he would have to like find a way to deal with her maybe not being able to go or the extra precautions necessary for her. Which again, I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, right? If you have any sort of person in your life or you care about who has these limitations, you know,
Mhm.
my my own parents, my dad's diabetic, so whenever they go somewhere, he has to remember to bring his medicine. They have to always have a means of like refrigerating or freezing, or not freezing it, but refrigerating the medicine. So it's just something
Mhm.
that's like that's obviously a lot smaller than someone in a wheelchair, but it's something that they have to consider because yeah, like if they don't, my dad can get really he's not that bad, so he won't like die if he doesn't get his insulin, but at the same time
Mhm.
he will need it soon, right? And it's a matter of like it's just like I get what they're trying to do and I think they do it fairly well. I just it's such a that kind of just goes to the core of this episode is like there's not much to say other than what it is, which is yeah, we're talking about hey, handicapped people can do everything normal people do, although they have these other limitations and we should explore these limitations with respect. And like yeah, and you did that. uh it doesn't really pertain to the rest of Star Trek. It doesn't really pertain to uh like ongoing plots or character stuff. It's just new character introduced. That's kind of our issue with the episode, I guess.
Yeah.
It's such a filler episode in a way, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just like this is an episode you'd see in TNG where it's like, hey, we're doing an episode that's just this one-off episode that's never going to be referenced again, and it's like it almost just kind of
Mhm.
like burns you for having any sort of investment in these events. Like this woman doesn't
Mhm.
become like a lover of Bashir or anything like that. Uh, but they bring up the analogy of the Little Mermaid, like because uh, she Melora basically traded her ability to float around on her own planet to explore the galaxy, just like Ariel and the Little Mermaid traded away her fins for legs. Um,
Mhm.
oh, hold on, let's see if I can get it. We're at the scene where Quark tells Odo he's gonna be killed. I want to see if I can get Odo's smile. No, hold on, I want to find it.
Mhm.
Dang, it's so close. I can just play it from here and see what happens. There it is.
Mhm.
Little the nice wholesome Odo smile as he imagines Quark being killed.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
But Bashir basically discovers that there is a type of neuromuscular adaptation theory that was explored like 50 years ago, but never really pushed forward because they didn't have the technology for it. Everyone kind of forgot about it. And then he rediscovered it, so he's basically readapting it to their modern technology. And within like less than a week, I don't know how long it is, he finds a way to basically modify her like mental mapping so that she can operate in normal gravity. There's some
Mhm.
sci-fi bullshit here. Uh, it's really her muscles that are the issue. That's what it seems like, right? Like she can't,
Yeah.
like when she was trying to walk, she's very slow. She struggles. Like she looks like she's walking with a ton of weight on her, which is yeah, that's probably what would happen if you come from a low gravity environment. The way they imply it, it's it's like something in her brain doesn't understand how to move in this gravity, so she can take this small therapy and it helps her move. That's what they
Mhm.
say. And then she has to do this therapy multiple times. The first time they do it, it kind of works for a few hours. And Bashir explains that it's going to work more and more the longer you do it. She's able to move around. They show her like she still has to wear the exoskeleton, which I imagine is just like a precautionary thing almost. But then she gets tired and she
Yeah.
has to go back to the chair. Uh, and this is where Bashir kind of explains the crux of it. It's like once you do this theory enough, it's going to become permanent, or treatment enough, it's going to become permanent, and she'll never really be able to
Mhm.
go back home for long periods of time. Which again doesn't really make sense. She wouldn't be able to move in her home world because of this therapy. I don't. I,
Uh,
it has.
it's
It
not even
can't be
with the
muscular that they're
nervous system.
affecting. Like, yeah, it's something with the nervous
Hang on.
system, but it's a matter of like I don't really get. So like again, humans operate like obviously the comparison here is humans, right? Humans are the walking around in normal gravity. Melora can't walk around in normal gravity. Humans can perfectly learn to adapt to zero gravity. There was a story of this astronaut. I think he was I can't remember his name. He was on the long. I think he still has the record for longest time in space, which was like almost 3 whole years. So he basically had been operating for 3 years under zero gravity. And as
Mhm.
such, he was so used to things not having weight. Whenever he was done using something, he would just kind of like hold it in the air and leave it there. So he
Mhm.
said, like, for weeks and weeks when he got home, whenever he was done with something, he would just put it in the air and it would fall to the ground and break. He's like, yeah, I didn't. I kept forgetting that I wasn't under zero
Yeah.
gravity anymore. And it's like,
Yeah.
so humans can adapt to zero gravity. I don't know why she couldn't adapt to her home planet's gravity, even if she goes through this therapy, but the therapy's weird. Did you find the thing about it?
Yeah. It's not with the motor cortex. I don't know why though. It doesn't.
It tissue
I don't.
stimulation due to increased activity in the motor cortex. It's like, yeah, it's kind of sci-fi bullshit. Like the way it's implied originally is that her musculature is just not adapted to this higher gravity. But then they're like,
Mm.
no, 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 we can do a therapy that fixes this. Um, and then
Mhm.
I guess a bit. This isn't really a spoiler because then we get to the scene where Cork gets kidnapped for the bars of Latinum. Melora doesn't want to do the surgery anymore. She is all about how
Mm.
she there's a level of I want to see if I can get the exact thing because one, she says if I do that, I'll never be able to go home, never really be able to go home because I wouldn't be able to stay there for other than short periods of time. I guess we're just gonna have to take her word for it. Uh,
Mhm.
and she says, look, it seems like a good trade, but she also says I really wouldn't feel like it's me. Like
Mhm.
she has sort of identified as being someone who pushes past this struggle and takes pride in that, which is like I guess I get it. I just I don't know. I feel like you do see this
So
actually yeah, go on.
her issue is basically she would never be able to go back to her homeland at all. Like it's a case like she she would give have to give up being a part of her people, going back to her planet, and being able to retire on it because it's probably a case like she wants to inspire those like people from her planet to go out in space, but she wants to be able to go back and like tell them about it directly, like because she's one of the few who have gone to space. It basically would be like if she does this treatment it it's going to take a very long time before any of her kind like the number of people go into space for her planet. So it's just like yeah, she doesn't want to be cut off from her people at all. It's basically like um imagine like, hey, you want to see outside of Japan, right? Like, say you're like a little Japanese peasant, and you're like, man, I want to go on that boat and see the world. And it's like, oh, if you do that, you'll be executed if you come back. I was like, what? It's like, yeah, that's what happens. And
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, like,
that's that kind of what she says. I want to see if I can find some of the other parts of it though. Hold on, let's see if I can find it in the. I could do a control F. Let's see. So she says originally she says it's a form of buyer's remorse. Uh, let's see.
Mhm.
Da, da, da. Yeah, because like trying to go back and forth between the procedure, like not making it permanent, would affect her motor cortex in a negative way. Um,
Mhm.
let's see. I'm trying to find like her exact thing because dang it, I want to find. I think it's is it near the end where she explains her like full reasoning. Um,
Yeah. Uh, all the way at
let's
the end.
see. Um, da, da, da. Yeah, because she says, she identifies I wouldn't be a Elasian anymore. I'm not sure what I'd be besides maybe, there's a level of
Mhm.
I could have
Mhm.
because like my interpretation when I kind of walked away from it was she has this level of like pride in this like the struggle of her doing this. She does
Mhm.
say like it would give her more independence, but sometimes she likes being dependent on other people. Obviously referencing like the relationship she had budding with Bashir. Um,
Mhm.
but like I don't know. I guess like maybe I misinterpreted some of the stuff when I read it. Yeah, it's mostly like she wouldn't really be herself anymore if she did this. Which, I mean, I guess that's fair. Like, I get that. Like, like, basically, if she does this, she is permanently cutting off something she wants to do in the future, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's that nature of she does want to explore space. This would make it easier. But if she ever wanted to go home, she couldn't. She doesn't really want to go home now, but she kind of understands that's something she might want in the future. So, and in reality, right, she could always do this procedure later on in her life if she really
Mhm.
wanted to. It's kind of just like I'm not going to commit to it now. Um, and like you mentioned
Mhm.
before, in the like background information, that the writer didn't like the idea. Like he wanted to write it so that she had a cure for her condition, but didn't take it, but ultimately didn't take it.
Mhm.
Um, which I don't know how you want to extrapolate this to the real world in the sense of like because like in this case, right? She's like, oh, I wouldn't be able to go to my home anymore if I didn't have that. That's not really a case for the real world. So I'm kind of wondering what his message is about in a sense. Like, is he saying like
Mhm.
there's you shouldn't cure yourself? I don't think that's what he's saying.
Mhm.
But I think
Mhm.
the implication is like it's not nothing's wrong with you like at the core. So saying that like you have to remove this is implying that something's wrong with you. Maybe that's kind of what he's saying. Like, sure, it would be helpful in real life if you didn't have this condition, but having this condition doesn't make you worthless, so you're not required to remove it to have value, I guess is the message. Either
Mhm.
way, I mean, like, they basically like the episode sort of finishes off when Quark gets kidnapped. They run into Melora and Dax. They kidnap the two of them, uh, or the guy kidnaps the two of them, gets them to a runabout, threatens to kill Melora, Dax, and Quark if they pursue him. Uh, when they're leaving, Cisco and I think it's a who is it with Cisco? I think it's like Cisco and Bashir. They get to a runabout trying to
Yeah.
follow him, trying to use the tractor beams. Uh, then, like when they use the tractor beam, he says, "I'm going to kill them," and he shoots Belora with the phaser. Uh, and they release them with the tractor beam. They go flying away, and then uh, like Dax notices that Melora's still alive and that she's slowly crawling to the gravity controls, and that the guy with the gun doesn't notice her. Melora turns off the gravity controls, and then because she's so great at flying through the air, she manages to stop him and disarm his gun, and they save the day. And then it's explained, why didn't being shoot with the phaser save me? And they make a point. Maybe all the neurostimulants you've been pumping into your system saved you. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, wait a minute. Why would a phaser not kill you because you're being pumped with neurostimulants? You know what? I'm not going to worry about it.
Uh,
It sounds like sci-fi bullshit.
so I think the idea is normally phasers basically act as like I don't think phasers technically burn you. They basically will. I don't know, man.
Well,
It's
so
some
like
shit. Usually they stun.
disruptors like evaporate your body, but
Yeah.
phasers, I guess like when they're set to kill, I guess it would like shoot you. Like I guess it's energy, so maybe it's like a hyper electrical like surge through your body that just kills you,
Yeah.
right? So like stun would stun you and like
Mhm.
only enough to knock you out. Like the like kill would, you know, shock your body and all the neurostimulants save you. But I don't know. That seems like something you could maybe like make it a plan for. Like, hey, you have this chip in your brain that releases a ton of neurostimulants if you're ever hit with a phaser set to kill. And who knows? Maybe if it immediately pumps it into your bloodstream, you'd start to like survive the attack. But I mean, I don't think they want to take that as canon that you could survive phasers through this because it's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it's
But
just
yeah, so
weird.
I mean, and then obviously you have the final speech where she doesn't want to like get healed because she feels it wouldn't be about her. And then the Klingon guy plays violin to them as they eat more Klingon food.
Hmm.
It's not a violin; it's a weird Klingon like pseudo violin. It's a tiny one string
Violent.
violin is what they call it in the transcript. It's a fine episode. I don't have anything else more to say about it. I think Melora is a fairly well written character for an episode she presented in, but I just personally don't find like the episode engaging. I do think there's like two or three issues with the episode. I'll put it this way. I think there's one major issue with the episode, and it's the phaser thing at the end.
Hmm.
I'm willing to like kind of drop it to a B minus. I'm not gonna drop it to a C. I was thinking about it briefly. I think it's a pretty big deal if you fuck with the rules regarding phasers. But I think this is such a small circumstance. I'm like, you know what? It's not good, but at the same time, it's such a
Hmm.
small element of the episode. I'm still willing to kind of give this episode a B minus. Uh,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, anything else you want to say about the episode? Like, I mean, I got nothing else to say about it.
I got nothing else. I've been letting you talk about this. This is really just like
As if
if
that's any
y'all
different from normal. I can't shut up.
when no, no, usually I'm the one who goes on fucking rants. But here's my thing, guys. If you like this episode, that's fine. I can see it. If you tell me that this is your favorite episode and you are not like uh also like handicapped in some way, I'm gonna look at you like you're a fucking maniac because like nothing about this episode is wowzers. But but if you are disabled and this is your favorite episode, I would say like, okay, that's fair enough. I don't think it's great, but I can see it's good and it
I'm
connects with you personally. But
I'm going to
yeah,
take the
it's
opposite point of view. Uh, no one should say this episode is a favorite episode because In the Pale Moonlight is a completely different season. And
okay. Shut up. Shut up.
like
Like listen.
everyone agrees that's like the greatest episode of of Star Trek from all time. It's like it's one of the best episodes. I don't think anyone would ever say any episode, but that one's their favorite. Maybe Duet.
Listen. I agree, but the issue is like you remember that time when we went down IMDb's like ratings for these, and I was about to murder the audience because we were seeing these ratings. I'm like, what the fuck do you mean? Dax is
I mean,
this high?
we usually hold on. We usually don't do this for this, but I will check out the IMDb scoring for this now that you brought it up. Oh, see, I'm
Yeah.
stupid because uh, I just did like IMDb Melora, and it gave me Melora Harding, which makes a lot more sense than giving me the episode Melora. Uh, oh, this episode is rated 6.4. I do not think it's a 6.4.
It's not 6.4. I mean, if
It's
we had an
I mean
actual
like
like 1 to 10 and not a 5 to 10, like yeah, like maybe, but it's like like a 7. It's a 7. It's fine.
yeah,
It's
I mean it's like a
fine. Like
7 like low 8 high 7 like it's just a it's
yeah.
just an episode that again like one thing I will say though it's like maintaining the record for uh DS9 season 2 is like yeah pretty much only good to like pretty good episodes. I mean like
Mhm.
there's not really been anything that's like bad, and this is not a bad episode. It's again it introduces a good character, but generally why I know why Pike and I like DS9 is because stronger continuity, greater world building, like really developing the existing cast as characters. This doesn't really do that. I guess it develops Bashir a little bit, which is why I do kind of like this episode, probably like to a small degree. But other than that,
Mhm.
it's not like super noteworthy episode. And with that, I think honestly we could probably just call it here. Any last words?
Yeah, that's fine. Um. You all should watch Dune 2. Okay, that's it.
Uh, All right. Well, you know what? I have not seen Dune 2, so I guess I'm in that cast as well. But anyway, goodbye
Wait, have
everybody,
you
and
seen
have
Dune
a good.
one? You haven't seen
Yes,
Dune one. You need to
I
see
have.
Dune. Oh, okay.
I've seen Dune 1. All right,
Okay.
we're gonna have this conversation at the end. Goodbye, everybody.